as hard as it is to recognize, most people, many people, let's say at least, go through the entire lifetime without looking at trauma.
Peter Crone, also known as the Mind Architect, also known as the Hitman for the Ego, helps world-class entertainers, pro athletes, and global organizations access higher levels of performance. He's a writer, a speaker, and a thought leader in human potential that specializes in revealing the limiting beliefs and subconscious narratives that dictate and shape behavior, health, relationships, and performance. Wow.
Yeah.
That's a lot to digest.
No wonder I'm so busy.
Peter, man, I'm so excited to have you on. First of all, thanks for coming down. Thanks for saying yes to being on the show.
No, dude, I love you, and it's a pleasure to be with you. And I've been a big fan of everything that you represent out there in the world, and I think you're an inspiration for so many. And so, if I can contribute in some way to you, to your audience, then that to me is a life worth fulfilling.
Well, I have no doubt that anyone who is listening to this episode is going to receive a lot of insight from you, and hopefully some brand new perspectives that they will be able to take forward into their life moving forward.
Yeah.
I know that we met at your house for the very first time through Andre, who helps me produce this show.
Yeah.
And it was for a dinner discussion,
kind
of like a round table event where it was like me and you and a few others. Blue, I believe, was there.
Some cool cats.
Yeah.
Logan was there, I think.
Logan was there.
Sealy,
yeah, of course he was there.
Yeah, it feels like a game show we're on already. Like, can I call a friend? It was Andre curated like the whole gathering, and he's done it subsequently a couple of times, and just really beautiful people, but we'd never met, and I certainly felt an affinity to you straight away. So I'm glad that we stayed in touch, and I'm here today on your show. So.
Yeah, same. The first time I heard you speak, I was like, who is this guy? Like, I don't know what he's about or what he does, but I just want to be his friend. I remember coming up to you afterwards. I was like, hey, man, I would just love to stay connected with you. I feel like we could get along and develop a friendship, and here we are a few years later. So
yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
It was an interesting evening, and I definitely feel like there was a lot of powerful sharing from everybody, but I do remember sort of being in one of those zones where I forgot the topics that we were discussing, but I certainly felt like I was dropping some insights for people to be able to relate to.
And I remember in that conversation, I think I was so moved by what you had to say, and I don't remember the content of what you shared, but I remember how it made me feel. And I just thought to myself, like, this guy is changing lives. Like, I had some pretty powerful perspective shifts in that one dinner, and I told you, I said, feel free, like, my platform is your platform. So any type of content that you want to share, I know that it would create ripples into the world. So I was happy to extend that to you.
I remember that and being very moved by your generosity like that. Because at the time I was pretty new to the Instagram waves, and I think I'd had an account for like maybe 3 months or something, and had all of my 5,000 followers. I don't know what it was, but it just meant the world to me that there was that kind of group of men particularly, but women as well, that were just so open to supporting one another, which I feel can sometimes be absent in the world. So and you did share, which meant a lot to me that you also followed through. So
I think you and I, correct me if I'm wrong, but I always feel like giving is you always end up receiving just as much, if not more, if you make it a point to help people, whether it is through your platform or whatever service you have to offer, or even if it's just paying them a compliment. I always try to leave the people that I meet or come in contact with feeling better in some way, shape, or form. And I think that you also have that gift.
Yeah, thank you. I say, the gift of giving is in giving itself, so like, if you really get that, like, it's very simple what I just said, but it's also profound, right? Because like, we often associate giving as though the recipient is the beneficiary. But to me, it's quite the contrary. It's not to say that there isn't like some reward or payoff for them on the other side, whatever it is. It could be a wilted flower that a kid gives someone that's touching, or it could be someone buying someone a brand new Rolls Royce. I don't care. But the knowing that we have the capacity to contribute and make a difference, hence the act of giving, is itself a form of self-valuation and validation, like where I'm recognizing my own worth and my capacity to make a difference. And people they miss that, and certainly I think there's a lot of people who struggle with receiving because they have these deep-seated programs of inadequacy or feeling like they're not enough. And so that becomes an impediment to receiving, because who am I? A bit the subconscious narrative, who am I to receive something, whether it's as basic as a compliment that people will deflect, or it be an opportunity that people dismiss. But they miss the benefit of receiving is it's dual, right? It's not just like you allow the person to contribute, but you allow the person to feel the benefit of contributing, right? So everybody can relate to the fact that when you give something to somebody, you feel good about it, right? Like, I made a difference, whether it's just kind words, someone's struggling right now, and especially in the world, like, and you made them feel better, you dropped by, you bought them some soup because they're sick, or whatever it is, you feel good by virtue of the fact that you made a difference. And people sometimes neglect to remember that when they're receiving, they're also affording the person who's giving them something that same experience. So, to just maybe take a beat before you automatically, because it tends to be automatic, like dismiss or deflect something and go, wait a minute, in my denial of somebody trying to contribute to me, I'm actually equally robbing them of the capacity to feel good about the fact that they just made a difference in my life.
Wow. That's so powerful, because I can relate to that.
Yeah.
To be honest, I mean, growing up and receiving praise just always felt uncomfortable. I was an overachiever, so I would receive praise, and I was gifted athletically, so I would always excel in whatever it was that I was, putting my attention to.
Yeah.
But I never felt comfortable receiving awards, receiving recognition, receiving praise, and I immediately would deflect it. And part of it, I feel, is a false sense of humility. It can come across as being humble, but in reality, it's almost a feeling of unworthiness, or maybe even what's the word, like imposter
syndrome.
Yeah, exactly. So can you speak on that?
Yeah, I mean, and knowing you as I do, like, a sweet soul, very sensitive as a man, like beautiful qualities that I feel like we need more of in the world. But I can also see that at a deeper level, there could be that sort of self-doubt, right? Sort of the feeling of not enoughness. So we could also say that your overachieving was a coping mechanism, right? So the person that becomes the people pleaser or the perfectionist or an overachiever, oftentimes that's an adaptation to the feeling of a deeper sense of inadequacy. So it's the way that we compensate. So if it is compensatory, then what happens is when you receive the acknowledgement for, the due performance, it still hits the part of you that was the driving mechanism for the performance, which is the part of you that doesn't feel enough, right? So that's where the dismissal happens. So the discomfort that you feel, and this is, again, maybe a powerful insight for you to receive, but like you're not feeling discomforted by the fact that you're getting an accolade or a compliment. You're feeling discomforted by the fact that it's triggering your own sense of inadequacy. So if you just get that, that's like a powerful shift, right? So, because we think we got hurt by what someone said, or in your case, you felt like you felt discomforted by what someone said. No, somebody just said something, whether it be offensive, demeaning, or in your case, like complimentary. But what it reveals is, where are we stuck in some story about ourselves? So if somebody gets triggered by someone being critical of them, then it might look like, well, they're being a dick or they're being harsh. Well, no, they're just saying something. They're literally taking hot air, using their vocal cords, making a sound. And if it was in an alternate language, you wouldn't know what they're saying. So right there's further evidence. It's not because they're blowing hot air at you with a certain vibration. It's that it's triggering some part of you that's unreconciled in the way that you view yourself. So if it's a criticism, it can only impact you to the degree to which you already currently believe the criticism, right? So in your case, it was a compliment, but it was met with this sort of resistance, because your view of yourself at that deeper level was, that's not who I am. So it doesn't match, right? Does that make sense? So, so the beauty of that, when you really understand the actual construct of what's occurring in communication, is it's never out there. That's the good news. If it was somebody out there that was making you feel discomforted, now you're a victim of circumstance. You're kind of screwed, right? Equally, if someone really thinks that they're hurt by what someone said, what you're saying now is that they have a certain quotient of your emotional like experience in life. Like you're giving them a pizza pie version of how you feel. So they have power over you, which when you break it down like that, it's like completely nonsensical. So it's really, we are the generators of our own experience. We use external stimulus as the catalyst or the excuse for how we feel. So your discomfort was precisely that, your discomfort. You know, you could have walked past the cow and a cow goes moo and you're like, no, I'm doing the best I can. Like really, no. Like, you know what I mean? It's like, it's a cow going moo, but it doesn't matter. The story was within you.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But that's such a, I mean, again, I'm saying it, so it may sound like weird coming from me. I'm not being conceited. But when it hit me equally, I was like, wow, that's such a powerful reframe, because as human beings, we're so easily bamboozled by the fact that we think it's the external world that's giving rise to our experience. And it's just completely not the truth.
So what you just described, it was essentially like a blind spot of mine.
Great.
Because I feel now that I'm older and I was even able to bring it forward in this conversation that I have some awareness around it. You took me 5 levels deeper than the awareness that I just had with that topic. But how do we uncover those blind spots or bring awareness to those parts of ourselves where we are stuck? What are the signals?
I mean, wherever we get triggered, you know, wherever we lose our sense of peace or centeredness, wherever something in life, you know, discomforts us, there's an opportunity to recognize that you've I was going to say misplaced, but you've misidentified with some story of inadequacy or insecurity, and you've sort of forgotten your own extraordinary nature, right? So think about it this way. If you get upset by anything in life, or you don't like the way something is, what you're actually saying is, I'm not okay with that. If you really, it's a very simple statement, right? Like, so I'm not okay, I'm not comfortable, I'm not happy with the way things are. And I understand people have subjective preference. They prefer things to be a certain way based on their view of life. But it denies the fact that as a being, you have the capacity at the deepest level to be with anything. You may not want it. Like, there's many things in Peter Crone's personal life that I've had as experiences of like, I'd prefer things to be otherwise, whatever it is, stock market, relationships, sickness, injuries, you know, things that occur by virtue of being human. But I realized that every time I wanted something to be different than the way it is, I suffered. It's a very simple equation, right? Like when you resist the way things are, you're going to suffer. And there's a deeper understanding that like you're actually saying, I'm not going to be okay if things don't change. Now, I understand personal preference. You can want things to be different. But if they're not, then it becomes super evident to realize that the more I resist something, first of all, the more it tends to perpetuate. And secondly, the more I'm in a state of discomfort. So why would I want to do that? So the blind spot that hopefully, or that you said you just got revealed, is powerful because you're like, okay, somebody's saying something. And the degree to which I resist that is the degree to which I'm now not only in my own narrative of inadequacy, which is discomforting, but now I'm also denying somebody's view of me, which you think of the audacity of that, first of all. It's like, no, you can't have your view of me. Like, it doesn't even make it, like whether they think you're like a saint or a sinner or what, everything in between. It's like, that's just their view. And if I had their DNA and I was raised by their parents and I had their trials and tribulations and the heartbreaks in, you know, elementary school to the teacher that picked on them or whatever they've been through, then I'd have the same view. So like when you really get it, it's like, why would I judge anyone for their perspective? Because they have no choice but to have that perspective. So to come full circle to your question, how do we get to those deep subconscious patterns and reveal them? Notice where you get upset by anything. It's like one of my favorite quotes. I'm writing my first book, as I'm sure you know, but I write in quotes, and one that people love and have shared quite a lot on social media is that life will present you with people and circumstances to reveal where you're not free. So that's the catalyst, is like wherever you're not free, aka in lay terms, you're not okay with something, there's an opportunity for some revelation.
Would you say that it's only the feelings of resistance that provide that for you? I mean, is a trigger only something that feels bad?
No, it can be inspiration too. Like we could aspire to something, be, like you said kindly when you first met me at dinner, like whatever it was I was sharing, the manner in which I shared it, the insights that you got from whatever I said, there wasn't necessarily pain for you. There was more like the possibility. So it can be sort of both a form of insight by virtue of some sort of trigger, or it could be inspiration for some sense of possibility. So either or can work for our evolution. Yeah, it doesn't always have to be suffering, thankfully, but invariably it is, unfortunately.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. I feel like for me, every time that I am triggered, it's difficult to recognize it in the moment.
Yes,
because I can feel engulfed or flooded with emotion, and it kind of shuts off this part of the brain that makes me feel self-aware.
Yeah,
I'm almost just controlled by the emotion.
Yeah.
So is that something that can be managed, or is that something that over time you create this sense of beingness with the emotion and not engulfed by it? I mean, what is the relation there?
Both. So, it's sort of, it's analogous to, like I say, if someone's had 6 tequilas and like give it like 20, 30 minutes afterwards and they're feeling like super tipsy, that would be like you saying engulfed with your hormones, right? Like literally there's a cascade from your endocrine system. You get triggered, which is really the brain perceiving a potential threat. In this case, it's not your life. It's like your persona, your identity, your ego is being triggered. But that does nonetheless flood your circulatory system with whatever the appropriate hormones are for you to go into fight or flight or freeze. And so it would be like asking the person who's had 6 tequilas, like, how do I manage that? How do I be sober? Well, you got to wait for a minute. It's like it's going to take a while. So the same with our hormones, right? So the first thing is to have a little compassion for ourselves. So when we get triggered, our primal instincts of feeling some potential threat, for a guy, it might be the other guy's stronger or faster. It tends to be around performance for men. For a woman, it might be she's prettier or the guy picked her, and there's sort of a threat there. Like these are very obviously stereotypical threats. But then your body is going to do its chemical warfare for a minute. So you want to have love and compassion to start with, which is what for me is sort of you bring that maternal instinct. When a kid falls over and they've got the owie, that's the chemical shitstorm that's just happened. And so we want to hold and reassure and say, it's okay, come here. Once the tequila has left the system, tequila has left the building, then we can go more into the paternal, the male instinct, of which is like, so what was it about what they said that upset you? So then it gets more into the analytical, right? So when you're in it, you're in it. Like, your dukes are up and you're ready to go to protect yourself potentially. And there's no like sitting down and having a rational, mature conversation. It's like you got to just run or fight or whatever you got to do. So compassion, sympathy, understanding, empathy, all of those are beautiful spaces to hold somebody when they're upset. Like, girlfriends do this great for each other. Like oh, honey, I'm so sorry. That's awful. You've just had such a bad day. Like, whereas the guy's like, well, why didn't you just leave earlier? Whatever the problem is, like, no, they're upset. You're not getting it, right? So both have their place, but men particularly tend to jump in with the male stereotypical response, which is a solution-based orientation.
Fixing it,
Yeah, versus like, just, I get it. Like, no, that sucks. That's really awful. Like, I'm sorry you're feeling that way, and hold a space of love and compassion. Then once the chemicals have sort of left the bloodstream and there can be a little bit more maturity and someone's ready to like look at things that were before discomforting or uncomfortable or difficult or challenging or upsetting, then you go, okay, yeah, no, it's just every time somebody says that, I always feel like I'm an idiot, like now you go, oh, okay, and where did that start? Now you can get into the analysis of it so that then next time they face the same external trigger, they don't have the same reaction. At least it's minimized.
For someone that has maybe, would you say that like holding space or being compassionate towards oneself is a skill that is inherited or witnessed and adopted, or can you, because I feel like in my personal experience growing up, I'm not trying to put blame on anybody, my family or caretakers or anything like that. It just, I didn't necessarily acquire the skills of holding space, and maybe it was in a sense of survival most of the time. So I didn't allow me the safety to be able to give that to somebody else. And as I've gotten older, I've recognized that was a quality of mine that I wanted to improve.
Yeah.
And there was no better container for that than a romantic relationship for me. And I was the exact prototypical guy that you just mentioned. I'm very analytical. I lived in my logical brain. So anytime a girlfriend was telling me about her emotions, I'm just like, well, just feel better, get over it. Like a sense of disconnect from the ability to have empathy for someone else. So how could, for anybody that may be resonating with that or wanting to improve their empathetic skills if or a capacity, what would you say to that?
I think it's a beautiful point and really wonderfully articulated, challenge that people have. And I think the easiest way as an access to getting there quickly is to always envisage the 2 or 3-year-old version of whoever it is that's struggling. And parents do this automatically. Like, and when I give them that sort of construct to work from, they're like, oh yeah, well, if that was my daughter, I mean, so it's just when we look at an adult, we're under the assumption that they should know better because, well, you're 20, you're 40, 50, you're 80. Like, you're a man, you're a woman. And that may be true biologically and based on appearance. But most people's emotional age really, without judgment, struggles to get beyond 5 or 6 years old, which is, it's kind of comical, but that's why as a species, we're really doing a lousy job. We harm each other, we harm ourselves, we harm the planet. Like, it's like a toddler doesn't know what the hell they're doing and they're just breaking shit, right? Yet we think we're all this and we can fly spaceships and blah, 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 right? But emotionally, we got a lot of room for improvement. So when you understand that, go, wow, everybody is really just having a tantrum, like when they're upset, like it's just a child having a tantrum. Now, that's not to say there isn't a place for like some discipline or some guidelines to sort of help corral somebody. You don't want a kid just like running around and, as an adult, like breaking shit and shooting people. Like that's another. Yeah. So there's a way to sort of like protect other people from somebody's tantrum. But if you just look at it emotionally from that perspective and go, okay, they're really acting out like a child who didn't get the ice cream that they wanted. I remember I was on Aubrey Marcus's podcast, I'm sure you know Aubrey, who's a dear friend, and he was describing something he'd gone through with Ilana, his wife at the time, and they'd had this argument. They weren't talking to each other for hours. And like I said, yeah, so you're both just sulking. You'd had a tantrum. And he laughed so hard, like, because it was like, yeah, that's it. We were just being kids. Like, and he's like, grown man, like he's a real man, but really emotionally, he was being a child. And so I think this is part of my work with people, is helping them to go through this arc of a human being's life, which is hopefully into greater wisdom, greater maturity, and to really stop being a child and to truly become a mature, conscious adult. So to start with, to go back to your question, how can I help people, is to recognize, look at yourself and others through the lens of a parent looking at a child who's upset. And that immediately will elicit a greater sense of patience and compassion. Because if it's a child that's upset, you understand there's an inherent like empathy because it's a child and they're frustrated. They don't know how to express themselves. They don't have the coordination, and that's why they drop the glass, or they don't have money and so they can't buy their own toy that you won't give them. It's like there's a bandwidth there of like patience, and we don't afford each other adults that. And if you did, it would really change the dynamic by which people can really heal in relationship, particularly like you said, in romantic relationship is when most of this tends to come up, right? Because that's the beauty of like getting your heartstrings attached, is like you can't just walk away. It's not like some guy at the grocery store who, just flipped you the bird, like whatever. Like, if it's someone who's living and shares the fridge and the bathroom with you, it's like, okay, we got to talk about something here because it keeps happening. So,
yeah, I love that. I'm gonna definitely remember that next time. Not necessarily for my partner. I feel like I've come leaps and bounds from where I was, being able to hold space for somebody. And there's like a process that I go through every time we have a conflict, and making sure that I do my best, my absolute best to hold space first and foremost, to try to understand what it is that she's trying to communicate to me.
Yeah.
But it's mainly whenever I have judgment for myself is where I find it difficult to hold space or see myself as a hurt child.
Yeah.
So I feel like maybe the partnership is improving, but still I'm actively working on having more compassion for myself.
Great. And just one little like note there, because it might help you with that part too about helping yourself, is when you said you're getting good or better with your partner in terms of what she's trying to communicate to me, was the word you used, if you listen back. I want you to kind of like, just, this will be powerful. Don't think about it, what she's trying to communicate to me, what she's trying to communicate, period. But you see, it's different. Because like for a guy, it's like, what's she trying to communicate to me? You're still involved in the process. There's still the I, right? The you that like has to do something where you're trying to get it right. And I just love your dedication to like your partnership, to being a better man, to being a great influencer in terms of your inspiration, your work, right? But I want you to think about it in the absence of you. If there's no you, if there's just the container of love and patience. So it's not, what is she trying to communicate to me? It's, what is she trying to communicate? And can you hear the difference? Subtle but powerful, right? Because then there's no you. Like now you're in her world, and that's the greatest gift you can give another human being, is to get their reality. Not like, how does their reality relate to me? Well, you're still there. Right? Which I know for a lot of people this might sound weird, but for those who are ready to hear it, it's very profound, right? Like in the absence of me, I'm just with their reality. And that's love, as far as I'm concerned. So whatever she's trying to communicate, whether it's sensical or not, like to you, it might be like, this chick's crazy, whether it's your partner or somebody else. No, they're just saying something. So what are they trying to communicate? Period. Not are they trying to communicate, how does that affect me? What do I think about that? What are they trying to tell me? Like that's you in a relationship with yourself. So now if we can extrapolate that, it becomes a little slipperier and it's like more subtle. But what is Nimai trying to communicate? Right? So then you learn the art of listening, which I would assert is like my real superpower when I'm working with people, is that I hold a space of pure listening. I get their reality. I'm not like Peter Crone trying to do something to fix their life, because I know from my perspective, there's nothing wrong. They just have a story that's in the way of me wanting them to see that there's nothing wrong. So I just listen to the story, and then very carefully and with love and patience, I can help them see that their story is in fact fictitious. It feels real, but it's not. And then when that's dissipated, they're left with nothing but freedom, right? Which is my main product, or at least a sense of peace and relief. So with yourself, the harshness or the inability to listen from a compassionate place, ironically, is part of the part of you that's asking to be heard, right? Meaning, like that's part of the same faculty that's based in inadequacy. So you do something, and then the part of you that's not happy with that berates you for it. Right? Like I'm guessing, right? Like, so there's this sort of perfectionist bent in there, which is part of the same mechanism. So it's self-sustaining. So versus look at, okay, well, you did what you did. And in this case, we're all human. So you made a mistake. You didn't do it as well as you could. You made a bad choice. Like I bought a stock and I lost money, or like, in my case, like I was like, oh, okay. Like that was stupid. It's like, no, it's just what I did, and my humanity, because I'm not a wizard and I can't see the future. Like I did what I did, and I made a choice at the time with the amount of awareness that I had. And when you really get that, there's nothing but like love and compassion for ourselves too, because you can only make choices at every stage in your life within the level of awareness you have at that time. So to, in hindsight, go back and say, I should have, is just a completely nonsensical perspective. Because who you are today, even if it's 24 hours later, certainly if it's 3 years later, which is where a lot of people berate themselves, things they did in their high school and their college, it's like, but you're like 10 years more experienced than the person you're berating who did what they did that was appropriate for a 19-year-old. When I was 15, I backed my dad's car out of the garage because he'd started to teach me how to drive, and I was excited, and I was like, oh, I want to try it. It was a little dark. It was kind of dusk, and I knocked the whole garden wall down. Now, I love my dad so much, like God rest his soul. And I would have never wanted to do anything to upset him. I certainly would never have wanted to do anything that was that catastrophic. It wasn't even a fence that was wood. It was brick. Like it was impressive, right? But for 15-year-old, curious and excited to learn, like that was an appropriate action. And I'm not saying that there aren't consequences. I had to mow the lawn and wash the cars and do whatever to earn money to build it back. And I think I even had to lay the bricks and whatever I had to do to learn accountability. But there's no judgment. There's no shame in that world. There's just like profound acceptance that we're all doing the best we can at every stage of our life.
I love that. The way that you can put things is, it just helps me understand myself in so many more ways than I ever could. I feel like in a vacuum, like I can't see myself just in the way I'm thinking or behaving, which I feel like has been an issue, or I don't even want to say an issue because I'm trying to not say that there's a problem.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that
It's a theme.
it is a theme of mine. And for me, it can come with shame or the should have kind of energy that creates judgment. Or how do you have the accountability of acknowledging how you showed up without having the judgment attached to it?
Beautiful question. Yeah, wow. So to me, that's like really then when you understand true responsibility. There's a very big difference between fault and responsibility. You're still a little bit, it's softening now as we speak, in the world of fault. Right? You look at, it's my fault what I did. Now, you might not be using the word fault, but like judgment, self-criticism, self-berating, these are all in the realm of fault, like the shoulds and shouldn'ts, right? I shouldn't have done that. I should have done this. That is now a critique of a behavior that, first of all, is redundant because the behavior's already happened. You can't change your history. You can only at best learn from it, right? And be accountable. Like if you did something like I knocked the wall down in my case, like it's not that I shouldn't have done that or I should have done something. Like it's what happened and now I'm going to clean it up, right? Literally and figuratively. So for you, understanding the difference between being responsible for your life versus having guilt and shame for your life. Subtle, but so profound because that makes space for your humanity. And there are consequences. People do some dumb shit in the world, right? And I like to, as best as I can, have compassion even for the guy right now somewhere out there in LA who's busting someone's car window and stealing a purse or an iPhone or like, I'm not saying that those actions don't require consequences, and they will to some degree if they get caught. Apparently in LA, it doesn't matter what the hell you do. Like the officials here that like have at it. Like they're doing such a great job of policing everyone. But anyway, that's an aside. But normally there's some kind of consequence, right? So there's the difference between being responsible for your life, which is an empowering conversation, versus it's your fault and you're bad and you're wrong. That's a disempowering conversation. So for you, hopefully the shift you're seeing is like, okay, you can maintain an accountability for your actions. You know, if I take this glass of water and I accidentally knock it, like, and it spills, like responsibility would be like go and get some paper towel or like clean it up. But like a lot of people are like, oh my God, I'm such an idiot. Like, I'm so sorry. And like, there's this over melodrama about, which is really a reflection, not of the fact that you just knocked a glass over in some water, like no one died. But what it did reveal is that that person's identity is probably around like the child that was reprimanded a lot when they did something wrong. They feel shame, they feel guilt. And anytime they now do something they categorize as wrong, they go straight into that little child of I'm bad and I'm in trouble. Whereas you'd be like, oh dude, don't even worry about it. Like, so if I had that response, I wouldn't even be connected to you in the moment of reality. So that's where, again, like it's saying, most people aren't in a relationship with life or other people. They're in a relationship with their own conditioning. So you like my quote is, I have an intimate relationship with reality. I deal with what's happening. And sometimes what's happening warrants like some serious action, right? Like, you know, like someone gets really hurt or in their, like, it's not like, don't worry about it. Like you're being, no, it's like, let's get a ambulance and you've got like you've broken your femur.
Be with that.
Blood spurting out of their like thigh, and it's like, yeah, it's fine. Like you're overreacting. Like what happened in your childhood? You know, no, it's like just being appropriate to what's called for. Like, you know, I use the analogy of like if you take a brick and you throw it into the ocean. The laws of physics are beautiful, right? So depending on the size of the brick, the weight of the brick, and the speed with which you throw it in, there's going to be like a splash and a sound that is totally appropriate to the physics of the size, weight, and speed of the brick, right? If we were able to pick up like a skyscraper and throw that in the ocean, then again, obviously bigger size, bigger weight, and depending on the height, a lot of speed. The size, however, the splash and the sound from the ocean is still appropriate to the skyscraper. No exaggeration. It's not like the ocean's like, dude, are you freaking kidding me? Like, this is insane. Like, it's just the splash appropriate. But most people in life get thrown bricks, but they react like it's a skyscraper. So if you can understand that delta, the differential, then you can really eradicate a lot of suffering from your life and go, wow, am I appropriately responding to the situation at hand, or am I reacting based on past trauma and stuff that I've yet to heal?
So with the trauma itself, I mean, it can feel insidious where you don't necessarily know where it shows up and reveals itself. For me, I know that, like I mentioned earlier, my romantic relationships seem to have been the place in which it was most apparent. Because as you're growing up, maybe some teenagers do dedicate themselves to self-reflection, but I did not. I was just kind of finding my way. And it wasn't until I got into like a more serious relationship that it enabled me to confront some of these traumas that I didn't know existed until I was in the container of the relationship.
Yeah.
So I suppose my question is, how can we become more vigilant at shining a light or discovering them? Or is it more about having an attitude of it happened and having some kind of peace with it? What side of the spectrum?
I think, that kind of question's a little bit like, the length of a piece of string. Like, it's like, I think I would appeal people to have patience and compassion again with others and self, meaning, okay, you might not have self-reflected as a teenager. And I think that's, again, a little bit of, you being hard on yourself like you were supposed. Like, I don't know any teenager that's self-reflecting. I know teenagers are smoking weed and breaking shit and like throwing toilet paper over people's homes and backing cars into brick walls. Like that's what we do as teenagers. So I think you can give yourself a little bit of space there. But I think it's understanding the arc of a human being's life is that everybody's going to face whatever they need to face at the appropriate time, not before or not like too late. So what might seem self-evident to me with all the work that I've done, like if I were to impose my journey onto somebody else relative to their education, their resources, their age, there's, again, that sort of energy of audacity and inappropriate expectation. Versus if I look at every individual as they're on their own journey, like then there's space to allow them to go through whatever they have to go through when they have to go through it. And let's be honest, like as hard as it is to recognize, most people, many people, let's say at least, go through the entire lifetime without looking at trauma. And that's a hard thing to like really recognize, like that. They don't want to, or they don't have the means or the wherewithal or the confidence or the help to look at what happened in their childhood. Now, they may dabble with some therapy, but for the most part, it tends to be self-medicated therapy, whether it's food, alcohol, prescription drugs, street drugs, whatever it might be. That's their form of coping. And it's difficult to look at some of these things that were really like painful or hurtful or scary for a child, which is invariably most children. So it takes a big being, and then we can get into a deeper poetic conversation about like how many lifetimes have they come around, like if it's a young soul, then forget about it. Like they're like, no, I just need to make more money. I need to get a 6-pack, a bigger home and a better looking partner. And then I'm fine. Like there's nothing to look at aside from that, and then you work, or I work with fortunately people who tend to be saturated in the material world and they're like still unhappy, anxious or depressed. And they're like, okay, I've got nowhere else to look because I fulfilled on all the things that I thought would bring me happiness. And so that's often the case, is there has to be a certain degree of some kind of accomplishment in our lives. Like we don't have to be multimillionaires or anything, but it's like, okay, I'm doing okay. And I feel like for some reason I'm going through the motions and not really getting along with my spouse. My kids don't really pay attention to me. I feel like disrespected, or there's now you start to look at these more subtle energies. So I think there's patience with self and other, that you're going to look at your stuff when you're ready. It's like you could look at a rose bush and go, well, what the hell? Like why is it not blooming? It's like, well, I mean, it's winter. You just planted it. It hasn't had any sun. You didn't put any, right? So it's the conditions that allow for those kind of subjects to arise. I couldn't for 1 minute claim any stake to the fact that I got to this point of revelation in my own life just because, I chose to. It's like, how conceited would that be? It's like, I don't know, like the series of events that at the time was so difficult for me, with a girlfriend leaving, or, my dad passing, or like, was that really my doing? Like at some level, okay, yes, esoterically we could say my soul curated it that way, but really I'm the beneficiary of my life, even the trials and tribulations that gave me the insight to be able to recognize the things that I recognize. And I would not for 1 minute say, that was all me. I think there's just such an audacious, arrogant attitude there. So I think that, again, on the flip side, recognizes like patience and compassion, and that, okay, what might seem self-evident for you, I've seen this many times, maybe you have, with a girlfriend or a guy friend who's in a relationship that categorically is dysfunctional. Like they keep coming to you because they're sad, or they keep coming to you because they're hurt, or they keep coming to you because they're disrespected. And you're like for you, it's like just glaringly obvious, like, what are you doing? Get out of the relationship. But they're not ready, And so people will face their quote unquote demons and their shadows when they're ready. And we can at best just love them for where they're at, and then support them when they're ready to get support.
I think after we spoke, we actually spoke, just to be transparent here. Whenever I was going through probably the hardest part of my breakup with Bianca. And from that conversation, you helped me realize that, again, the things that happened in the past happened. And I was looking at them through the lens of, trying to understand why it happened to me, and holding on to these stories of the pain that was associated there, and the breakup and everything. And since then, or I don't know if it was your conversation or kind of series of events, but I've really tried to change the way that I look at those difficult moments and see them as places that can offer a far greater perspective than the one that I have now, that can help me evolve, and seeing those events as something that has happened for my soul's highest spiritual evolution. And for me personally, when I started looking at those things that way, it softened everything that happened and allowed me to start examining it from a place of curiosity rather than a place of reactivity.
Or resistance.
Or resistance.
Beautiful.
So is that something that happened to you, or can you resonate? Do you resonate with that at all?
100%. I think the difference is, for me, very early on in my own journey, I recognized that these difficulties were actually opportunities. So I didn't resist them. I was just like fastidiously curious, like I was like, okay, like why am I getting upset? Why do I have fear? Like why do I worry about this? Or what is the deeper concern at hand here? So for me, it became like an exercise in true fascination about my own conditioning. So obviously when I was younger, there were different ways that I would placate it, and I would do my own sort of escape mechanisms. I was never into drugs, or, I'd occasionally have a few cocktails in college, but like I never used substance in any way. I tended to be more like, I'd just get sad, or I'd sulk when I was younger, But I very quickly recognized that actually this is an opportunity for growth. And as you were speaking, I think you'll love this like comparison because of your industry, which is if you look at training, physical training, and I work with a ton of pro athletes who are like you, like just svelte and shredded and strong. And if I gave, like, say, one of my MLB guys like 2 5-pound dumbbells, and I was like, dude, okay, let's try and knock out like eight reps. It's like, he'd look at me like I've got like, I'm smoking crack, 2 heads. And because there's not sufficient resistance. So we understand it in the physical domain that actually, no, we could actually argue that we sometimes push ourselves too hard into resistance, right? Because of ego, and we want to get bigger, or like we want to have this sort of personal best. But we understand that I need conflict. I need something to be fighting against.
Mm-hmm.
But when it applies to the emotional, people go the other way.
Mm-hmm.
So no, I don't want to deal with it. But if you could understand that the same growth, like whether it be my resistance capacity in terms of strength or my cardio capacity in terms of like fitness, my VO2 max is getting better because I'm sprinting on the treadmill. Like if you apply the same principles to emotional strength, to emotional growth, then you're going to want to dive into resistance. Right. And so whenever I've used that with people in like space like you in the fitness, like there's this sort of like epiphany. It's like, oh my God, yeah, like that makes total sense. You don't go to the gym as strong as you are and like pick up like these like 3-pound dumbbells and show people what you can do as a chest fly. It's like, no, if you're going to get better and get stronger and evolve and access different levels of potential in your physical realm, you know that you have to face adversity. So when life is now your quote unquote squat rack, coming at you and it looks like, whoa, hang on a minute. I've only done 160 before. Like this feels like 250, It's like, okay, well, as Mother Teresa said, life, she knows God won't give her anything she can't handle. She just wishes, he didn't trust her so much is the way she phrased it, which is beautiful, right? Like, so just trust that life is always going to give you something that's somewhat in your wheelhouse, even if it feels like it's beyond your current capacity. And for that reason, it may take time. You don't you don't jump like 100 pounds of squatting or deadlifting like overnight, right? But there's a progression. So sometimes when there's adversity, you take a while to work through it, but we don't want to go the other way, which is like, you know what? I'm not good at deadlifting. I'm going to go over and do the row because that's all you've ever done. It's like, okay, no, like there's an opportunity for a better job, but I'm scared and I'll make more money, but it's okay. I'll just do what I'm doing. But then I'm going to complain to my friends so I don't make enough money. It's like, well, right? Does that make sense as a comparison?
That's perfect. I love the analogy. My mind immediately went to, I love training. Yeah. And I seek that out every single day. I go to the gym and make it incredibly uncomfortable for myself. Yeah. Because I know that on the other side of that is I'm going to find strength. Yeah. And I'm going to adapt. Yeah. And be more resilient and be able to handle those moments of discomfort. Yeah. For longer and sit with them. Yeah. But how do you do that with the emotional realm? I mean, I don't want to go out and just start argue with people.
No. You don't have to. There's plenty that will argue with you. You know what I mean? It's like you don't have to seek it out in this world. Believe me. Just post something about the COVID on online. You'll have plenty of triggers.
Plenty to work with.
No, just that's the trust component. That's the recognizing, look, being human, like in Buddhist terms, like the human experience is suffering. It's one of the noble truths, right? So, you don't have to wait too long before something's going to happen, right? You're an active guy. You've got a beautiful relationship. You've got your business. Like you've got moving parts. Like life is going to provide some wrenches in the mix. So now it's just a reframe instead of like when those things happen, going into some sort of retreat, defense, deflect. It's like, oh, okay, great. Here's something. I'm being upset. I'm being triggered. There's some inherent fear that I'm feeling. That's my opportunity to put some chalk on my hands and to like see if I can lift this.
Would you say that those inherent feelings that you're talking about are common amongst people, or could you categorize them into like a sense of unworthiness or not enoughness or?
Yes. So there's primal patterns that we all have just by virtue of being human. Like not enoughness is certainly something that everyone can relate to. An absence of a feeling of worth for sure. And again, depending on where people are at in their arc of their journey, some people will have transcended it. Some may not even have gotten into it yet. It might still be dormant. Some people might be like in the midst of battling it right now. Some people might be trying to escape it, justifying it. There's a myriad of different stages people at. But like in my work, I've recognized 10 primal prisons that we live in. And that's what I'm going to be writing about in my book. And the journey of a human's evolution in terms of their spiritual growth is to break out of all of the 10. As far as I'm concerned.
Did you list them in order? You don't have to get into them if you wait to share them in the book, but is there one that sort of unlocks the next level?
It's a beautiful question. No one's ever asked me that question. There is a natural cascade, Okay. So what I realized in the way that, like, for whatever reasons, my blessed mind works is I saw that the whole experience of life is based on the laws of relativity, right? So meaning, in lay terms, we only experience something by virtue of we have a relationship to it, right? And I always use a very simple example. If you're lying in bed and you feel hot, but you move your leg out to the side and the sheets are a little cooler, you only have that experience by virtue of the relativity of temperature. So when that hit me, I was like, oh, like there's a definitive list of types of relationship we have as human beings. And so I broke that down, and without giving away the whole farm here before my book comes out, but like, we have a relationship to ourselves, we have a relationship to others, and you get the theme. And then I broke that down. I was like, oh, well, in a relationship to ourselves, I have a relationship to my body, I have a relationship to my thoughts, we have some sort of spiritual relationship, and, relationship to our emotions. That's not super like, wow, that's amazing. Like you go to a spa and you hear about mind, body, and soul, right? Like, but I was like, oh, and so there was a subtle to gross cascade in terms of like, okay, if we look at the innermost, which is the spiritual, and then the next subtle will be sort of the mental, and then the mental cascades into the emotional, which then shows up in the physical in your body, right? Like, so you have a thought about something that makes you feel anxious, and your anxiety manifests in your stomach and butterflies or whatever it is, right? So I started to see this cascade. And again, just by virtue of feeling very fortunate to have the mind that I have, I recognize within each of these levels of relationship, there was a fundamental constraint that was primal. So it is a cascade. So you start with one that then sort of like that stack of cards, bleeds into the next. Not to say that that is automatic. You have to still do work at that level and recognize the fundamental pretenses that we live in. Like thinking I'm not enough, it's very real for people. And it can impact their life to becoming homeless. Like if they're really in I'm not enough and they feel worthless, and they could lead to drugs, and then they, basically completely sort of degenerate into somebody who becomes an addict. But being driven by this not enoughness, like it really has an impact. But the not enoughness itself is not a truth. It's just a story that got developed or triggered through childhood, and a kid being dismissed or told that they were worthless, or you're a mistake, or, kids hear awful things, right? So anyway, beautiful question, but yes, a subtle cascade, and that's why I'm so excited about the work, because I think it's almost like this formulaic approach to enlightenment, because you sort of go through each stage, and once you recognize and find the location of that prism within yourself, see the correlating events that transpired in your life that gave evidence to that prism. My brother was more the athlete, or my sister was the better academic. That's why, that's when I was 5 and I started to feel not enough. So that helps to have a placeholder as to when it started. Then we investigate the validity of it. As I said, it's never a truth. It's just your own reality. And then once we undo that, we discover what's on the other side of that, which is freedom.
Freedom. Wow. I have one question about that.
Yeah.
Is the memory a requirement? If someone dissociated in some traumatic event, is the memory a required details about what happened a requirement?
No, but it's pretty fascinating how many times, like I was just working with a client, super well-to-do, does a bunch of finance stuff, not wanting for anything financially, like super successful. And in his mind was not dealing with trauma. It was more something in performance in his life, which on the surface looks like, just whatever, being someone who's interested in his case, sports, it's not a big deal, right? But by virtue of like doing the revealing process, he remembered this particular event, and he said, wow, I haven't thought about that for 30 years. So when given the space, going back to your question earlier about like, how do we, when someone's going through something, and I was using the sort of the maternal first, look at a child as if it's a child having a tantrum, or they're hurt and they're upset. Your natural proclivity is to want to hold and love. So when someone feels that space, the brain feels sufficiently safe to actually process something. So I assert that I hold a space of just unconditional love and acceptance. And so people feel comfortable sharing anything, because there's no potential ramification of being belittled, judged, or criticized. Because these things that hurt, we tend to have shame around, so we don't want to share them, right? So you don't have to remember it, but in the right context, in the right conditions, the brain can remember things in a way that it feels safe and very healing. So for him, it was like, tears came up, and that was what was required for him at the moment to just sort of strengthen his realization that it already happened. He would have had the same revelation, not maybe to the same degree of feeling it. That would have taken a little longer. When you do have the emotional recognition and correlation to an event, it just helps to harness and integrate the understanding quicker, which is why it's nice if you can remember it, but it's not pivotal. It's not imperative.
Was there a way to maybe come at it the opposite way through like a physical modality of releasing and creating freedom, emotional freedom?
Yeah, for sure. I think, when people could do like a lot of breath work, like I think that can be like incredibly cathartic. I've seen people, just start crying out of nowhere. Even people who do something like massage work or like fascial release, like really getting in there, deep tissue. The stuff can get stored and they might not know where they're crying. That's my only consideration is with the physical manual work, it can be a little bit disorienting if you feel something but you don't know why. So I tend to be more in yoga terms, jnana yoga. There's like bhakti yoga. There's different forms of yoga in terms of worship or dedication or service. Mine tends to be more just by virtue of my way of viewing life and my intellect is like it's the jnana, like sort of that buddhi, like intellectual yoga. So I like to personally help people understand something. I think it gives them the reins versus you could, like as a trainer, if you told somebody, hey, do this on Monday, do that on Wednesday, and they're getting gains and they know there's obviously a correlation because they're doing something and they're seeing, but if they don't fully understand the mechanism by why did you have me do this exercise? And, there's an empowerment that I think comes when you give somebody the equal understanding as opposed to just the instruction. So I think I know it can go both ways. I just personally love there to be some sort of correlation with the psychological as well, so that you can become sort of the master of that domain versus just the experiencer of it.
Yeah, I like that because I feel I've been incorporating all of these different modalities, including breath work, meditation, just trying to find peace through different ways.
Yeah.
And I have had my own experiences with breath work in particular and have had incredibly intense emotional releases that also spawned or allowed me to remember memories that I had forgotten about.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's all really one continuum, right? Like they talk about the mind-body connection, like there's this, like there's two entities, and really it's like when water is boiled and it becomes steam, like it's not really two separate entities. It's just in different forms, So to me, mind and body, it's all interrelated. So when you recognize that natural correlation of one form to another, then if you tweak something over here, then this has to at some level. It's the sort of basics of entanglement theory, right? In quantum physics, like, you tweak one electron over here and the other one immediately instantaneously shifts. So for some people, they're more physical and they're more in their bodies. Like a lot of women, they like to dance or they want movement as an access to something. And maybe even when they're feeling emotional, they might go for a run or like they have to dance or something like that. Guys, we tend to be a little bit more sort of, left brain. We want to analyze, we want to think it through. So I think all of it, even for myself, like as much as I love to understand, I think there's so much power for me in terms of like truly breaking things down and really like systematically understanding. I still am very as into my workouts and, infrared sauna, cold plunges, like doing this, these alternate therapies, hyperbaric chamber, like this is an intrinsic part of my experience of life and I can't deny it, So
how important would you say food is in that component of creating freedom or the feeling of freedom or experiencing it?
I mean, it's as in Ayurveda, which is part of my practice, we have the three main pillars, which is ahara, nidra, and brahmacharya. So meaning the first one is intake, like what are you taking in? It's not just like food, it's impressions, like mentally. You're watching violent movies, you're watching, like video games of people shooting, whatever it is. Like that's a form of ingestion. So it's very important. Like it's, it's as important as sleep and lifestyle, which are the other two, nidra and brahmacharya. So for me, it's overlooked. I think also the way people eat, like it's another form of relationship, right? Like what kind of relationship do people have to food? Invariably, it's driven by some sort of emotional imbalance. Like for a lot of people, food is the ultimate drug, right? They may not think that they have an addiction because I don't smoke weed, I don't do cocaine, I don't have a drinking problem. But, when they come up against something challenging or they don't know how to deal with something or they're upset, how many times does that happen? And
just go look in the fridge, see what's there. Nothing's there. You come back 10 minutes later and look again.
Right. And there's a certain degree of patterning there that people are oblivious to where they're being driven by their emotions again. So food is imperative. Obviously, we need it to maintain this meat suit. And food itself it's a massive topic, right? Because as you know from all of your expertise and being a vegan and all the beautiful things you share with your community, but then there's like whatever that song is, there's levels to this shit, right? Like it's like like I could hold up a carrot in one hand and a carrot in the other hand, and as far as we're concerned in terms of labeling, they're both carrots, they sort of look similar, but in terms of the prana and the energy, like one could be full of like GMOs, glyphosate, carcinogenic chemicals, and the other one is like made in some loving mother's backyard. Both carrots, but in terms of the impact they have on their physiology, night and day. So to me, it's imperative, but it's insufficient. Like there's too many other components, because I could equally work with someone who does have all the organic, clean, they have a chef, but the way they eat is in a hurry, under stress, at a table with people who don't respect each other, in a relationship that is disharmonious, and under stress because the person feels like they've got to deal with like emails. So they could be eating the best food, but their digestion is not going to work because they're in a fight or flight mode. Conversely, if someone is eating, I would never invite anyone to eat GMO foods at all, but if they were, but they blessed the food, they were doing it ritualistically in the way they ate, they were giving gratitude for the fact that they have food, then their body's going to alchemize it in a different way. And that's that realm of mystery, but
that's where many people will go into that spiritual realm when it comes to food and the consumption of it. I mean, ultimately that's the reason why I'm vegan in the first place. I was raised under the Hindu belief system where they don't consume flesh. They do consume milk and ghee. When the cow is raised with a certain level of reverence and respect and love and care. But you and I both know that's not the conditions that most of, if any, of the milk or cheese on the shelves are raised. So
far from it.
It's more of a spiritual way of cleansing my body or keeping my vessel pure, or as pure as possible, to allow me to operate at my highest level of consciousness. So I feel like I don't talk about that much because I feel that a lot of the people aren't receptive to that. So my access point is through performance and vanity, essentially just showing people what you can achieve, because that on a very deep level will speak to many people because they have these feelings or these beliefs about themselves or self-image that will actually create enough motivation to change. And then they experience maybe the spiritual benefits of adopting a plant or a cleaner diet. Spiritually cleaner.
I think, for whatever, you take it or leave it, but as an invitation to you, I think just because of who you are, I think you'd be maybe not shocked, but perhaps a little surprised how many people, in ways that maybe they don't fully understand, are drawn to you, not just because of aesthetics. You look shredded and it's inspiring, and the potential for a human anatomy. Like that's what, especially Instagram is obviously so popular, is that you see what could be possible for oneself. But my guess is that many people follow you for a much more profound reason, because you have something to offer that's beyond the visual, right? Your kindness, your heart-centeredness, your dedication. These are values as opposed to aesthetics, and so I would invite you to maybe appeal to that a little bit more, because that's what the world needs. Whether it's through food, meditation, and I'm not saying you don't speak to these, but you just said yourself you don't really talk about it too much. So I think it's a disservice to your followers and to yourself to not let them know what's behind the curtain a bit more. You know, like I'm always very happy to be vulnerable about my life and what I went through. And I think that's where people really relate, because they can look at me and go, wow, this guy's just like da, 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 da. And I get bombarded with compliments of like, wow, I've never met someone so at peace. And like, you just don't seem to be fazed by it. And it's sort of under the impression as that's how I always was. And it's just not true, you know? So when they hear like the adversity and those things I've been through, it becomes much more relatable in that case. And in your case, you know, what were your struggles with food, or what, you know, where have you had like your own like back and forth with yourself about should I, shouldn't I? And that becomes much more, to me, inspiring versus like, it's great to see some guy who's just shredded and, you know, can lift the things you can lift. But like to understand the who is behind that is just my invitation.
You're absolutely right. I mean, before you came, I made a post on Instagram today, and it was a picture of me with a hoodie and some short shorts. Probably the shortest shorts that I own. And it was leg day, and I went and trained with them. And I took a picture of myself, and then I was writing the caption. And in the caption, I was detailing and explaining how I, not so long ago, had a very deep insecurity about the size of my legs. Because being a professional bodybuilder and competing in the category that I did, I was focused heavily on the upper body. So I would avoid training legs because I could spend another session training the upper body, which would then put me in a better position to compete. So my legs were underdeveloped. So naturally that brought on a bunch of comments from people online. So it made me deeply insecure about them, to the point where I would not wear shorts at all. And now here I was posting this picture, and I was reflecting to myself, and I was about to share how I had this insecurity about wearing shorts. And part of me chose to delete that caption because the part of me that is afraid to be seen and, or maybe come across as somebody that can be perceived to have a very aesthetic body. So I'm nitpicking with my own insecurities. Like, how dare I be insecure when there's other people that are in quote unquote worse shape than I am aesthetically. And here I am complaining about my insecurity.
I get it.
So what's going on there with me?
I think there's two parts. You can have your humanity and have the insecurity, and then the sort of the elixir to that conversation is, but I decided to post it because what I'm learning to work on is self-acceptance. So it's not just, you're not leaving people with criticism, you're leaving people with humanity, right? So you're sharing vulnerably, like, you know, even if it's like relative to somebody else who doesn't even know how to squat, and they're like, you kidding me? Like, my legs look like matchsticks, you know, it's like, what's your problem? But they will be able to relate to the fact that you said, you know, even in my realm of expertise where I compete, like through the realm of comparison, which is where we always feel inadequacy, like we compare to these ideals and standards, which are not truths, they're just whatever we glob onto to maintain our own insecurities. But you can share that, everyone can relate to that, like, you know, whatever their version is. And then the sort of the medicine is, and I wanted to post this anyway because it's challenging for me. And I want to learn to embrace my own humanity. And I hope you can find something that you perhaps don't like about yourself and find some love and acceptance for yourself. It's something, you know, like I'm putting words into your mouth. But so do you see they can coexist?
Yeah.
Because otherwise what I hear is that you had an opportunity to be vulnerable, then you second guessed yourself, which is the same mechanism of self-doubt, which is still perfectionism. So even if your perfectionism is about not showing perfectionism, it's perfectionism. Do you see that?
Yeah.
It's so subtle.
Find a new way to manifest.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So you're removing something because you don't want to come across in a certain way is still a form of perfectionism. It might be well intended, like you're being considerate, you're not being arrogant about it. So at least you've got like the sort of the more, you know, like the softer version of it. But what I feel is like there's just an opportunity for you to literally embrace your version of fear and insecurity. And everybody's got that. And then people are going to say whatever they say. But if you articulate it from that space, it's amazing how few people react, because they're not picking up so much on the picture or the physical words. They're feeling the energy of my humanity and my rising above that to go, you know what? It's okay.
Oh, beautiful. Thank you, Peter.
You're welcome.
I really appreciate you.
Yeah. Thank you. Back at you, my friend.
And thanks for the kind words earlier too. I was trying my best to
not deflect
and accept it fully, because that has historically been where I was at, and I'm working on that actively.
Well, you did a great job, and I appreciate you even, being honest about it. And the thing I want you to recognize again is I'm saying something. What it's revealing is what you've already said about yourself. Right? Again, a quote I say, other people's words can only affect you if you already believe them. Right? So when you really get that, it's like no one upsets you. They just say something, and what it reveals is what you already think about yourself that is upsetting. And so there's more space for love and acceptance of self.
Wow. Thank you so much, Peter. Well, before we end this conversation,
sure,
you have a mastermind coming out that I wanted to talk to you about and learn more about. Because I would love to join.
Yeah, I'd love to have you on it. It's going to be so fun. I mean, I've been blessed to do many workshops and courses, but I don't in any way want to diminish the impact they've had, but this just feels like it's going to be so huge. And I'm so excited because I literally will get to interact with people, albeit online. It's not a live event, but like all the other stuff has been streamed where I talk about anxiety or depression, and it's helpful. But now I'll coach people and then explain what I just did. So if someone's a coach, they're a teacher, they're a trainer, they're a nutritionist, they're a parent, anyone who's in the realm of helping anyone who would love to understand human psychology and why we suffer, this is going to be super powerful.
And when does that come out?
We're going to do 6 months. The first month is at the end of February. So I think we'll start talking about it like end of January, middle of January. And then, we'll do the whole launch and people can join it. It's probably like in the first 2 weeks of February.
Awesome. Well, I've said it before and I'll say it again till the end of time. Consider my platform an extension of yours. Anything that you have to promote, I'm more than happy to share it with the world and my audience, because I really do feel that you are creating massive shifts in the world and allowing people to discover themselves and experience freedom. And you do have a gift. And it's so apparent even through this conversation and through all of the other conversations that I've listened to online. I didn't know I listened to as many podcasts of yours as possible before, and I found a playlist on Spotify that has a compilation of all of your podcasts. So there's some fans out there that feel the same way as me.
Wow, so, that's so touching.
Yeah, I'll link it in the show notes. So if you want to hear more of Peter's work and conversations on some other prolific podcasts, be sure to check that out. And I'll also link Peter's Instagram, your website, anything else.
That's it. No, just like the book's coming up. That'll be towards fall. That'll be like, somewhere like towards the end of the year. But that I'm also very excited for. But thank you. Thank you for the kind words. I love being with you. You're such a sweet soul, and I'm so glad we're friends. And your generosity, again, means the world to me. I'm just doing what I can to help people. So it's really only through people like yourself with big platforms, shows like this, that I get to share something that hopefully, people took away, and it can just nudge the needle in terms of their life and a greater sense of freedom and inner peace and true vitality, which is what I'm committed to, giving birth to here as a new type of human being who's not living in a place of fear and survival, but really from a place of freedom and love.
That's so beautiful. And I applaud you on your mission, and please give Peter a follow. He is well worth a follow if anybody is deserving of one compared to, I'm not even going to say it. Either way, just thank you again for tuning in, for listening, for subscribing to the show. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a comment, please leave a review. And as always, I'm sending each and every one of you love and light.